Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to mention a movie called Gods of Egypt. Recently, in this movie, Gerard Butler plays a character by the name of Set. Of course, this guy here, of course, from Game of Thrones fame, plays Horus. And we have several gods. Horus's father, of course, being named Osiris, and the main character that is being involved in this film, the mortal in this film, is named Beck. Every name is very confusing. Every name is kind of all over the place, so it's kind of very hard to remember everybody. There was also Chadwick Boseman, if you guys remember a little movie called Black Panther, the King T'Challa's, um, or Prince, or yeah, King T'Challa, uh, T'Challa. He is in this movie, Chadwick Boseman. Yeah, so I honestly think that this kind of reminds me a lot of films. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Thor, and I mean a little bit because there's certain kind of like budget gaps, and there's some kinds of like story gaps, but and there's some kind of like it's not like supposed to be like humorous or hilarious or whatever, but it does in some vague way kind of remind me of Thor. Um, and we're gonna get into like the non spoiler variation of this of how it kind of reminds me of a lot of things, and then we're gonna go into, of course, a double five count as per usual, and then we're gonna go into spoilers. Just to let you know, if you're brand new to all this, definitely subscribe. But otherwise, you guys can donate to the channel if you like. Dollars and cents at any time, you can do that to really help out the channel, because it really does, everything that you do actually does matter on this channel. But yeah, so reasonably, yeah, this movie kind of reminds me of just kind of like it's a fun movie. I thought it was just kind of like a fun film. It kind of reminded me of the Mummies or the Scorpion Kings or the Ben Hur's kind of sorta in a way, like the kind of the old fashioned movies of Egypt and stuff like that. It was just kind of a fun film. I just kind of took it for that. I didn't really take it as like oh no, another god film. Ugh. No, like this movie kind of felt pretty decent. Like I can understand where the story was going. I can understand like why people were doing the things they were, because ultimately it kind of falls in the same kinds of films where it goes at first in the beginning of the movie to a battle of the throne, and you're kind of unsuspecting stuff to go on in this film. Reasonably, yeah, like I said, Gerard Butler in this film plays a character called Set, who is actually Horace's uncle, which is kind of funny because they don't look much older than one another. Um, because Set and Osiris are both the favorite son to a god that is has a boat in the sky, which is a very odd concept. Again, this movie kind of reminds me of like also kind of like the Hugh Jackman movie Van Helsing. It kind of reminds me of uh questionably like The Watchmen at some points. Like a lot of like visual aspects kind of remind me of Watchmen. Um, and not to say that this is like, it sounds like for me to talk about this, it sounds like this movie is kind of like all over the place, and it seems like it's more than what it is. Yeah, this is a very old-fashioned tale, brought back to you like several years ago when Egyptians were putting together pyramids and stuff like that, and um, like this isn't a modern tale; it's kind of a tale in the past. Reasonably, yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. Or I thought it was just kind of okay. I just like the adventure. It's probably something that I'll say like it's better than what it is, and people go into it and like, yeah, I didn't really like this movie. I hated it. Oh, it's stupid. Or oh, I didn't like the computer graphics. Or oh, I didn't like this. Seemed like a very small budget movie, and this and that. Like, yeah, I get it, but I don't know. I just kind of thought it was fun. Like I just like I didn't walk away like hating the film. Like I think there is like an interesting progression to this film. It seems like a lot of it is revenge and power corrupts absolutely, which seems to be the two main things going on, which is kind of very interesting. We also have it to where, of course, as per usual, like not all gods can just fight it out in this film. There has to be mortals being involved as well. Like the one crafty mortal that could be able to achieve something that no one else can. And so like there is that element to this. Reasonably, I really did think that there was like some points where I was like, okay, I don't quite understand why like a person just kind of quickly gives up the way he does, or there's some people that it's just like, okay, like why promise something if you will never think that you can actually achieve something, or like I don't know, it's like there's some aspects of this where it's like, okay, why go after these people now? Like, why wait so long to go after these people? Like, did you just decide this overnight that you're just like, man, I guess I'm gonna go after all these people and take them all down because it's Tuesday? I don't know. But anyways, yeah, it's you get to in this movie where you ultimately see that the world is going to end in the wrong hands. So there has to be a correction of like, well, like there has to be a real hero out of this or the world is going to end. So I guess in the past the world isn't going to end because the world is still here. So it kind of ruins that concept of just like a past setting where it's like, well, the world didn't ever end. So um yeah, so people have to prevail at the end of this, but it's kind of like you're just there to enjoy the ride is what I can really say. Anyways, it's just yeah, there's not much to really go into really besides that. It's kind of a lot of like passing the torch through most of this movie seemingly, where everybody is just kind of like, okay, well, I feel like you're the next person for the job, or you're the best person for the job, or like, oh, okay, well, I want to be the person for the job, and like you stubbornly weren't going to give this to me because for some reason or not, like these people unwaveringly were favorited, and I didn't understand why. So you you go into this movie and you're hoping that like I think this movie does have rewatchability because you might not clearly understand things the first time around. It's not that everything is so confusing and so all over the place. It's just kind of like, okay, like you're not quite set up to know who people are really or good enough. So it's kind of it would probably take more than one watching to clearly understand who people were, who people are. Because there's a lot of times where it just kind of seems like, okay, this person's just here now. Okay, this person's just here now. Okay, this person is just here. Like, I guess I would have to have cracked open a book and looked who these people were prior to going into this movie because it doesn't seem like I'm getting a good enough assessment of who these people are via the film, which is weird. Like, you would think if you're going to set these people up, you would actually, like, give us a full background of who these people actually are. It doesn't seem like they're doing that enough in the movie. Like, the gods that are represented in this movie aren't represented well, which is weird. Like we just don't get a good enough backstory of the actual gods. We just get a backstory of Set and Osiris, and maybe Ra, the god of death, and that's about it. Um, but yeah, other than that, yeah, I just kind of like I just thought it was like, nah, it's an okay film. Like there's something interesting about it. Anyways, yeah, so that's it was just kind of a fun film. I don't know what else to really go on and say, so I think I might get into spoilers because all I can say is that it's just kind of like it's kind of it's a fun film to just kind of bide your time. It's not exactly one of those where you're going to go in and just be like enthralled about everything. I just kind of thought it was okay. I just thought it was meh. Like there was some special effects that I couldn't quite understand right away. There were some things that I couldn't like. But again, with more than one viewing, because I guess you could watch it multiple times if you really wanted to. Because yeah, I don't think it was that bad of a film that it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like a one-off to me, or it doesn't feel like you're never gonna watch this again kind of thing. So maybe if you watch it again, just kind of like, yeah, I didn't quite catch a lot of things the first time around, but the second time around, I paid attention a little bit more. Like for me, I kind of also kind of like casually watched it because ultimately I was just kind of well, I was like I was my retention was stayed on it, but like I was kind of also just kind of like doing other things as well. So like I was consistently kind of going back and forth and like yeah, I'm understanding this movie like or I'm enjoying this movie like and maybe if I heavily like sat down and watched it per second, maybe I would have a different point of view of it. But every aspect of which I had seen, which is 95% of the movie, I would say that yeah, it's an interesting avenue. It's an interesting adventure. Like yeah, there's not uh like there is kind of a riches to rags and then rags to riches kind of story with this. It kind of not putting this movie too high up, but it is kind of very much like a kind of Lord of the Rings, like Return of the King kind of story. But again, I don't want to make this seem like this movie is too epic because it's not like that. It's not like a very, oh my god, I need to go out of my way to see this movie. No, it's just kind of an interesting film. Um, I just kind of got something out of it. Like to me, it kind of also kind of felt like kind of like a Conan Barbarian the kind of story. Like you appreciate the action. There's not much of a huge amount of like story like thickly going on in this movie because it's kind of very simplistic. It's kind of like okay, this guy wants revenge. This guy wants to destroy this world that he lives in, and then there's people in between that Gerard Butler has to continuously kill. So yeah. Anyways, I think it's about that time to go into spoiler counts or into spoiler counting of five. But you know what? For people that hadn't seen this movie, I would just be saying, yeah, it's okay to watch. Like yeah, it's not gonna be something that's gonna be like, wow, but ultimately it's gonna be like I think it's watchable. Like I think it's something that I can point out to people and say, "Hey, go ahead and check out." So without a doubt, now it's spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's that time again to spoil this movie. If you want to hear what goes on in this movie regardless, if you had seen this movie and you want to get my real, true, legitimate thoughts about what I felt about this film, or maybe I'm more honest than I would be before. Now is your time to keep watching, but if you don't want to get spoiled about this movie, it's your turn to turn back now. So, spoilers. Gods of Egypt. Reasonably, we have Gerard Butler, who is not really, surprisingly playing a villain in this film. Ultimately, he starts being the uncle of Hector and hugs people and says, yeah, like, oh, it's great that I'm here. I'm sorry I'm late because he like there was a crowning of this guy getting being king, Horus by Osiris, and reasonably, Gerard Butler, which is set in this movie, he eventually goes and just starts killing his brother Osiris, and then in turn starts to go after um Horus as like a kind of like a battle for the crown. Ultimately, like with kind of this unique kind of notion, figuring out a way to blind Horus to be able to, in turn, get the crown. Ultimately, leading to where Horus is blind, and now his eyes are uh, displayed somewhere to where no one can get them. Maybe not everybody, because there seems to just be some mortal who goes out of his way to get this one eye, and it's super hard to get the other eye. Anyways, it gets down to the journey of this mortal going to this god and saying, okay, I'm gonna give you this eye, and now we're gonna, like, you're gonna get your revenge, and this and that. But I need my girlfriend. Like, I want my girlfriend back, because ultimately, while trying to get this eye, his girlfriend had died. And, like, she really believed in him, and she, like, yeah, it was this and that. Anyways, so you get to the point of, okay, well, Horus just says yes, knowing full well, like, he can't bring people back from the dead. So, reasonably, Horus goes and starts to, like, go after his other eye, or eventually kind of goes to, like, people that could figure out clues and this and that, and he goes after his old friends, and, like, talks about, like, hey, I need you to solve a puzzle, which was Chadwick Boseman. He also Horace meets up with his old girlfriend, um, that was now being betrothed to Gerard Butler, because Gerard Butler was the king, and Gerard Butler just starts going around and killing all these gods. Like, he goes around and starts killing all these gods because he uses every piece of them to, in turn, is trying to, in some way, fusing their godlike powers with his, making him more than one god, because his goal is to be immortal. His goal is to, but his goal is to basically destroy the afterlife, making it so, like, people live forever. Anyways, you get to where they have this situation of Hector and his bang of crew, all the while fighting a bunch of either CGI, like, bullish characters or whatever, that are sent by Gerard Butler, or fighting gigantic CGI snakes, which was kind of interesting and fun. But kind of remind me of, like, a Wrath of Titans in a lot of ways. It's just like, really, we're going about this route, okay? But this is pretty interesting. Um, we ultimately lead to eventually having, like, Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther, going and trying to solve this riddle of this thing, ultimately to eventually be able to um, have it to be where they solve this answer, but ultimately, while trying to solve this riddle, it ends up that they just end up getting imprisoned by Gerard Butler's character, who ultimately steals Chadwick Boseman, and, like, basically becomes, like, the most powerful thing possible to go up against his grandfather, and, or to Gerard Butler, it would be his father. Um, to Gerard Butler, it would be his father, because ultimately, yeah, it would just be because yeah. Anyways, he kills his own father, or he tries to kill his own father, because ultimately it doesn't quite 100% work out. And he takes the power of him and tries to become his own father in power terms, and then seeks out that he wants, like, the world kind of destroyed by this big, huge, like worm lizard looking thing. It looks weird. It's kind of like a kraken, but in, like, a worm kind of term. ultimately, we have it to where eventually it comes down to the like Horus believes that he's like there's no way to defeat this guy. It just feels like ultimately there's no way to win. Cue to where the girl that is with them, the god of love, gives up her wristband because evidently she can't quite fight Gerard Butler anyways. So she gives up her Wonder Woman wristband to Beck, so that way Beck can give an amulet to his girlfriend to um, be able to be all good in the afterlife, so that way she can go to heaven to have some kind of prize. Well, it ends up being that I guess he actually didn't actually give her the wristband, the whatever thing. So, or not the wristband, like kind of like the it's kind of like a very Wonder Woman esque like wrist thing, and ultimately leading to where Horus goes and like really just like I think with the like the basically the questionable death of his girlfriend. I'd say questionable because she's not really dead. He just has to go and find her again. Um, like yeah, because ultimately at the end of the movie he has to kind of do that regardless. So he goes and just eventually decides that he needs to fight Gerard Butler regardless. And recently, for some bizarrish reason, like this horse guy finally has success because I think there's so much like brewing. Like his woman is questionably dead, his father is dead. There's so much vengeance and hatred and whatever going on. Ultimately, leading to where there has to be this fight out, even though Gerard Butler is so much more powerful. But it ends up being that Horace does kind of really does outsmart Gerard Butler. All the while before this, like I was thinking it's really interesting how Gerard Butler's character set was being like a king in this thing. He was just kind of really establishing dominance, really like going and killing all these gods, which was kind of cool. And ultimately, he was just kind of like whatever, like whenever he would come to room, he would just kind of like own everything and just like yeah, like I'm gonna have a good time with this person, or yeah, I'm gonna kind of like take this person, just take him out because I'm like, he really owned all the situations and he really like took people out and it was really kind of interesting. I really like that. Anyways, you get it to where, like I said, Horace and Gerard Butler battle it out and Horace has the upper hand. To eventually, Horace takes out Gerard Butler. Um, and ultimately, yeah, like there was a point where like Gerard Butler like basically tells him it's like, well, hey, like I showed you mercy once, and it's like, yeah, and that's the biggest mistake I've ever made, and like, or that's the biggest, and I'll never make that kind of mistake. And then he like stabs him and kills him, and then he reawakens his grandfather or his grandpapa, his granddaddy, so that way he can his grandfather can like destroy this like kraken creature, and everybody wins. It gets to the point to where yeah, eventually Horus becomes king. Beck becomes like his second in command. Because ultimately, like when grandfather is like, "Oh, I owe you a debt," and like and basically Horace's wish is just that like the people that he wanted alive would be alive, but I guess he didn't realize to ask about his wham and his woman. So, but eventually he went to go afterwards and go and find her, like I said at the end of this movie. So yeah, it was like ultimately, I guess like you can watch this movie backwards and just kind of like watch it over again and over again because again, like a god is like unbeatable. So maybe like yeah, it's like I don't know. Anyways, I just thought that this was a good film, and ultimately I don't know. Like there's some aspects about it that I probably quickly forgot. Um, Ultimately, Horace did get his second eye back from one of the people that evidently found it, and so he was a two-eyed guy at the very end of the movie because evidently the whole his whole thing was he did not need eyes to be a god again, and like he didn't need to like he just needed to believe in himself he could do anything kind of thing. And so yeah, I think that was a real journey in which this guy had to get into, not only revenge but then realizing that he could do anything if he kind of set his mind to it. So yeah, I just kind of enjoyed this movie for what it was. But yeah, I'm not going to try and make this too long of a review. I just thought it was good, or I just thought it was okay. And so yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.